Hello, hello. Hi, everyone tuning in. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Just want to welcome folks to today's webinar, Mobilizing and Advocating for Youth in the Outdoors. My name is Mel Mendez. I am the New York and Northeast Regional Coordinator for Latino Outdoors, and I'm so excited to be serving as a host for today. We have some incredible panelists, Julia and Madeleine, who I will pass off introductions to in just a second. But I'm particularly excited for today's webinar because all of us, in one way, one shape or another, the three of us are involved with the Outdoors Alliance for Kids, affectionately known as OAK, OAK. And for those who are tuning in who might not be familiar with OAK, we are a national coalition of more than 100 businesses and nonprofit organizations who are committed to connecting youth, children, and families into the outdoors. And so I know each of us kind of engage with OAK in our own very different and unique ways, but it just goes to show that, you know, there are so many ways to get involved in advocacy, especially youth advocacy in the outdoors, and that every player, every type of player is needed in this work as well. So just super excited to have this conversation and just so excited to have you both joining us today. So let's kick it off with some introductions. I'm actually going to ask folks who are tuning in, please feel free to either drop in the chat box or, you know, if you're tuning in on Instagram, feel free to make a comment. Where are you tuning in from? We want to know maybe your city, state, or the native lands you're on. And then I will kick it over to you, Julia, first, and then Madeleine to follow after. If you could give us like a bit of an introduction. And today's icebreaker, and I'll explain a little bit why I chose this later on, but today's icebreaker is, what is your favorite childhood memory of you in the outdoors? So, Julia, I'll kick it over to you first.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mel. Happy to be here. Hey, everyone who's tuning in. My name is Julia Hurwitz. I use she and her pronouns. I am the campaign manager for the Outdoors Alliance for Kids, like Mel mentioned, so really grateful to be partnering with Latino Outdoors and be here on this panel today. I'm very lucky to be tuning in today from Guatemala. I've been working remotely for a little bit, so I feel like I'm kind of doing a humble brag there. And I'll tell you a little bit more about OAK and the work we do later, but favorite childhood memory, there's truly so many to pick from. I was a huge fan of like finding rocks and shells on beaches. I grew up in New England, had a lot of access to really beautiful outdoor places on the water, and it was one of those things where my parents had to like drag me kicking and screaming home every single day when they took us anywhere really cool. And my brother was already inside playing a video game and I was still being dragged across the sand. So probably not a huge surprise in this role today, but really happy to be here with you all. And Madeleine, I'll pass it to you.
Sweet, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Julie, for passing it over to me. I'm Mads, or Madeleine, pronouns she, they. I'm tuning in from Detroit. I am a full-time college student, and I think my favorite childhood memory would probably be going to the park or to the beach with my older brother and my mom. They would always take me, and my older brother, he would always say like, "Oh, like you're like a little model and stuff," and my mom would dress me up. So that's kind of a core memory for me.
Similarly, actually, as well, one of my favorite childhood memories is going to our local park here in the Bronx during cherry blossom season. And we take like family photos and portraits as well. And so I was always the kid who was like zooming in on the petals versus like, oh, we don't need to be in the photo. My mom memories. So I feel both of your stories deeply within me too. And the reason why I like asking this icebreaker, especially is, you know, sometimes we talk about pretty heavy things when we're talking about advocacy, you know, policy work and all that stuff. It's to really understand the why we do the work that we do, right? And why we care so much is because I think all of us intrinsically have this connection to the outdoors or to green spaces, you know, however you refer to it. There are these special, almost nostalgic moments that we each carry with us. And those moments matter to us, and it matters to us to protect and keep these green spaces so that not only we can relive these memories and maybe share that on with like, you know, our own families or, you know, future generations, but so that other folks can build and have their own memories in these spaces as well in whatever way it looks like. So I really like to kind of open with something that's a little bit more sentimental and emotional because it just brings us all together on like, this is why we're doing the things that we're doing and why it's so important. So thank you both so much. So before we dive into our conversation today, I wanted to just kind of set the context a little bit. Like, why today? Why are we three convening and just kind of chatting about this? And it's really because we have an overlap of two really incredible moments or campaigns that folks are working on. So from our end, from Latino Outdoors, we are celebrating our annual week-long celebration honoring and recognizing Latine youth and families in the outdoors. And then also, there is Hispanic Access Foundation's annual Latino Advocacy Week, which is also an annual initiative that focuses on empowering Latinos to become advocates for themselves, their families, and their communities. Right. So lots of advocacy work, lots of focus on youth and future generations. And so it just made so much sense, I know, in my mind, and when the three of us were chatting earlier, of just like, well, this is like the perfect place for Oak to chat about, right? Like Oak serves on this kind of cross section of, you know, working with youth and intersectionally marginalized communities and building from a national level policies, platforms, and efforts to get folks outside more. And so I know during today's chat, we'll talk through a little bit of all of our different ways in which we've engaged in advocacy and the unique perspectives that we have, and just kind of showcasing, you know, different tips, tricks, or recommendations for others to also get involved in their work. So I know I've been doing a lot of yapping. I'm not the star of the show. It's both of you. And so for those tuning in, if you haven't already, let us know. Feel free to drop a comment of where you're tuning in from, your city, state, or native lands, and just going to kind of kick it off with a question for both of you, which is, can you each share what first inspired your connection to the outdoors and how that evolved into a passion for advocacy? So I think for this first one, how about I kick it over to you, Madeline, first, and then Julia.
Thanks. So I guess the first time that I kind of got involved with the outdoors, I was a junior in high school, and it was all because of Detroit Outdoors. Before that, I'd never really kind of gone out camping or any of that. I was completely unaware of a lot of those things. And I remember joining my school's outdoor adventure club, and it was supposed to be kind of student led, but there was a little bit of lack in that area. And so kind of when I joined, I kind of started taking a little more leadership, I guess you would say, with like how the club was ran and stuff. So I started rock climbing through Detroit Outdoors, this climbing club that they did at our local climbing gym that I had no idea was there. But after that, that same summer I went on my very first camping and canoeing trip. And after that, was life changing. I mean, I'd never been out there. I'd never really gone out to do something like that. And I remember my parents being really kind of they were kind of scared to let me go because I'd never been out there. So after that, I grew this passion for wanting to be outside and for wanting to allow that to more people. So the following year, I still in my school's outdoor adventure club and I became club president. And throughout my time there, which was my last year of high school, we were able to get even more students from my school out camping, snowboarding, skiing, rock climbing, biking, all these things for free, which was kind of a big deal because a lot of these things were inaccessible for us because of transportation problems or because it just seemed really expensive to do. But it was also their first time, so we all got to share all these things together.
That is so
Love
cool.
that. And I also just want to, Madeline, like you're smiling and it's so contagious. Like reminds me as well of like some of those moments of like when I felt super immersed in the environment of just like wanting to bring other people along in that journey and to kind of share that. So Julie, I know you have a little bit of a different perspective as well. And so tell us a little bit about, you know, what inspired your connection to the outdoors.
Yeah, definitely. And before that, Mads, I was remembering the boat bus coming to Oak Week a few years ago, which is just like the coolest thing, the most energy coming from the Detroit Outdoors program. And you guys have the coolest club ever. I wish I had done that, but it's amazing. But yeah, mine is a bit different. I was very lucky, grew up in New England where there's just a lot of nature around and it was pretty accessible for me. I grew up with my backyard bordering on a park. So my brother and I would be after school till dinner. My parents had a literal dinner bell because we couldn't hear them from as far as we would go wandering in the woods. And the most common, activity was like building forts out of twigs that we would collect. And I was a huge bug collector. Like I would come home with frogs and my parents would be freaked out, but it was just always such an important part of my childhood growing up, was just being outside as much as I possibly could. And I, from a very, very early age, felt my most comfortable outside, which I think a lot of people kind of have that connection to nature where it just feels really calming and like something of a spiritual connection to the outdoors. So that was really how I became obsessed with being outside all the time. I love to do tree climbing and rock climbing and camping, and just was outside as much as I could be. And then I went to high school and I did kind of our equivalent of the club that you were leading, Mads. We had a ski snowboarding club and we had a hiking club. And so I tried to do as much of that as possible. And I remember in the hiking club, I met someone who grew up like 2 miles from me, but just didn't really have the access to the park that I lived on, and was like so scared of so much that was happening outside because it can be so intimidating, and, wasn't fascinated by bugs, but was terrified and was scared to fall out of a tree, which of course makes so much sense. So it really kind of hit me, like, if you have these experiences really young, it just becomes second nature. And it becomes so much less intimidating because it really can be like a scary thing. So, I guess that kind of turned into the passion for advocacy. Now I feel really lucky to have fallen into the work of Oak, which is, like you said, Mel, doing kind of exactly that, just trying to connect kids at a young age to the outdoors and give them accessible opportunities to get into nature. Because a lot of kids don't have that. 28 million in the US, 28 million kids don't have easily accessible nature from where they live. So, feel very lucky to have turned that passion to an advocacy and to my career path.
Absolutely. Love that, Julia. Thank you so much. So, Mads, I'm going to turn this question a little bit towards you specifically. So when we first met about a year ago, for folks who don't know, Latino Outdoors is a general member for the Oak Coalition, but we also serve on the steering committee as well, really figuring out, what does the future of the outdoors look like for youth and for families, and really figuring out, okay, where can we throw our weight to help build accessibility into this work. And so one of the fun moments that we do get to engage in amongst all of this work, right, is kind of our Oak Week and our Oak Awards. So it's really a celebration of folks doing incredible things in outdoor advocacy specifically for youth. So Mads, you were one of 3 youth recipients for last year's Oak Awards. And so just to kind of quote it a little bit, because I think it's important and I want to give you your flowers for this. So the Oak Awards recognize members within our community for their quote unquote significant contributions towards advancing opportunities for children, youth, and families to connect with nature. So I know your journey has shifted a little bit since, graduating from high school last year, now being in your first year of college. Tell us a little bit, like, what were you working on back then, and how has that advocacy or like focus shifted since you've graduated? Like, what are you working on now? So kind of like a before and after, if you will.
Yeah. So back then I'd been club president of my school's outdoor adventure club for a couple months, and we were working on really trying to get students outside. I mean, there were a bunch of students in my school who had never been outside, and a lot of those reasons were because, one, we live in a really urban area, there isn't really much to do, and two, getting outside and kind of like getting out of the city was really, really expensive. A lot of students never really been outside because of that. They didn't really see it as accessible, which we saw as a problem. But yeah, throughout that whole time that I was there, for me and like the rest of the board that was for my school's outdoor adventure club, we kind of worked really closely with Detroit Outdoors, and we worked on trying to get students outside as much as possible. So we kind of told like a lot of our members like, oh, you can go here and here and this is what you could do, and a lot of them were a little intimidated. They were very, very intimidated to know that like they would leave home and go do something completely different. But we kind of tried to get students who had already been on prior trips to kind of like speak on their experience and kind of like talk out like what they had been through. And slowly but surely, we got more students to sign up for trips. We had students go to New York for climbing. We got students to go to Yosemite. We got students to go to Boundary Waters. We got them to really get out there and, do all these things. But another thing that we did was we also tried kind of like curating our own events around our school where it was specifically just for for students in our school. And we took some kids kayaking and biking, and those were really, really fun experiences that they seemed to enjoy. And a lot of them were very shocked and surprised to see that this is accessible. These are things that we could do and that we could have done at a much younger age if it was accessible for us. But what I'm doing now is, I mean, I'm in college. I just finished my first year, and and it was a really, really amazing experience. But I'm working in education now, and I've kind of tried to kind of make this space for nature and for preservation to be present in the classroom, because I feel like it would be really important if students could learn that at a much younger age, to know that they should appreciate nature a little more and kind of be aware of like their surroundings and stuff, and that it's there for them. Nature is there for you. But I've also kind of tried to come up with a rough plan for next year so that I could potentially bring an outdoor adventure club to my school, because my school doesn't really have an outdoor adventure club. It's an art school, and we predominantly kind of focus on just art things. So there isn't really much space for students to kind of have that relation with other people in that community. So I'm starting to wonder if, that could change things for us. So probably next year, I'm kind of thinking about bringing that up to my school and see if that's possible.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing. There are two things that you mentioned, Mads, that I like kind of uh, sparked a light bulb on my end. One is the first, it's like people don't know what they don't know, right? Like I got into the outdoors and environmental work and climate work, quote unquote, later in my life. Like as when I'm youthful. I am no longer a youth. So it's perspective. But when I was growing up in my childhood, there weren't really like a lot of conversations on like careers in the outdoors, or like what does it look like to explore the outdoors on your own. I think to your point, like it can be very intimidating. Julia, you mentioned that overwhelming feel as well. And so I think, that's just like another reason why spaces like Latino Outdoors, like Oak, were created, is because, you know, we need community in order to kind of bridge some of these gaps as well. Like I'm definitely going to trust someone who I know who's maybe been to Yosemite versus just like trying to Google it and figure it out myself. Like that's a big scary place. And so being able to bring people into the fold and say like, hey, how can, now you are an agent of change, how can you like share that and spread that along? So good luck on bringing kind of this next chapter to your college work. And then also the second point is, what does it look like to have art in the outdoors? And that's something, we've been playing a lot with at Latino Outdoors as well. It's like it's not one or the other, right? You can definitely have both. And I think that's what's exciting about the outdoors, is that it can be this medium to hold a lot of different experiences and memories and moments. So what does it look like to, do watercolor classes like in the middle of a field, right? Or, to maybe do like some bird drawings after a birding event, right? So there's fun and unique ways to connect the outdoors with arts and with other, different topics that I think is just so exciting and draws people in to that work. So love that. Julia, again, Mads, you're the youth, and Julia and I are youthful. So yeah, Julia, you have a different experience because you've really been ingrained in this work professionally for quite some time. So same question to you really is, your work touches on so many different aspects of advocacy and community building and so much more. So what are some of the priority projects you're working on now, and where do you kind of see that future growth and efforts looking at?
Yeah, definitely. I think you touched on it too. So, like, I guess I'll give a little background on Oak to kind of explain where I'm coming from. Like you said, Oak is about 120 plus organizations, businesses, green groups from all shapes and sizes that kind of have many, many different priorities, but everyone has that overlapping mission of getting kids outdoors in some way, whether it's through policy or direct programming with kids. We have big groups like the REI who do a lot of kind of the advocacy and National Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs, and then also really localized groups where, maybe they give a bike to every fifth grader in their local community just to make sure that every fifth grader has that access to bike. So it really runs the gambit, and it makes it really fun and can sometimes be challenging to find ways that members from this whole spectrum can be engaged on these priorities and And, we primarily do federal policy, but that can look really different for a lot of different people. So it's always just trying to meet people where they are and make sure that everyone can feel engaged. Like you said, bring as many people in as possible, build community while we're doing this advocacy work, and amplify voices that don't always get amplified. So with that being said, I guess I'll talk a little about what we're doing now, which I'm sure many people who are tuning in here know and have felt the impacts of the current administration. It has been a lot of blows to programs that are trying to get people outside, to our federal agencies, to the employees that run that. I'm thinking things like national park rangers who run the programs in the parks, who have been laid off, and now those programs just really can't run. So we've been thinking a lot about how can we show our support for those agencies and those employees, and really show the local impacts that these actions are having, because the administration might not realize it, but we hear these really impactful stories. I heard in one national park, one person was laid off, but they were the volunteer coordinator. And it means that now the 27 volunteers can't work. And so it was one layoff, but it's 28 people now who can't be helping maintain the trails and make sure the parks are running and clean and available for the public to use. So a really big campaign that we're working on right now is that storytelling and trying to make sure that those local impact stories are being elevated and used as advocacy. But it's kind of a great way to engage people across Oak, because many are feeling those direct impacts and many people are telling that to Congress. So we're kind of doing that in two ways. The first that I'm really, really excited about is our postcard campaign, which I know Latino Outdoors has gotten involved with. And that's a really cool way to actually hear from youth directly, which I'm excited about. I think a lot of times in youth advocacy, we're advocating for youth, but we kind of forget to advocate with the youth. And so I'm excited that this postcard campaign can hopefully try to bridge that gap. And like I said, trying to meet the members where they are. We intentionally left these postcards kind of big and vague, and so people can fill them out with whatever makes the most sense for them. But generally what it is trying to hear from kids the stories of how they got outside, what programs brought them outside, and why that was so impactful. And with advocacy, I think it's really important to uplift those local stories as a more meaningful way to have people hear you and to show those impacts. So I'm excited about the storytelling campaign, especially the postcards. And for anyone who's interested in being involved, I am more than happy to share those links. And then we're also doing a collection tool for very specific local impact stories. So if you were a laid off AmeriCorps employee, or if you rely on federal funding to get kids outdoors through your local nonprofit and that funding has been cut, this form allows you to fill it out directly. It goes directly to your member of Congress. And then we're working to turn that into blogs and op-eds and social media and all that. So really just trying to raise the awareness of the impact that these cuts are having and that these actions are having. And hopefully, in doing that, we're bringing new people in, we're making opportunities for every Oak member at whatever level, and being able to elevate like youth voices and voices that don't typically get a front seat with advocacy.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the postcard campaign. It's funny, as you were talking about, I was looking at the version I printed out as well. And, I think some people think as, this is a recurring theme, I think for all of us, that it's like, engaging in advocacy is scary. It's this big nebulous thing. Like, what happens if I don't even know my member of Congress? Like, where do I even start? Right. And I think what I love about the postcard campaign is that it's a simple prompt, I think, for folks to kind of get behind, because I think what we've all been talking about is people don't know what they don't know. And so the more that we're able to collect these stories, the more that we're able to share it, the more awareness and attention we can bring to these issues, and to not just issues, but to the solutions as well. Because I think, if we want to talk, you and I, Julia, for example, again, we could talk about youth engagement and outdoors, but at the end of the day, we are not the youth. We are not that audience, youthful, but not the youth. But it's folks like Mads who are, I'm not going to say that you're speaking for your generation, right? None of us are doing that. But it's like, you are from the audience for which you are the future seeds, for which who will carry on the stewardship work, who carries on the advocacy. And I think maybe we're also trying to shift the narrative from carrying that to you're also active members in uplifting that and creating it yourself as well. So all that to say is I just wanted to flag that, the simple prompt of this postcard is really just, so I participated in XYZ, whatever event brought you outside, and getting outside is important for me and other kids because ... and you fill it in. So it can really be as simple as that. And you'd be surprised with how much powerful information and testimony, we can receive from folks who are living this in their everyday and who are the voices for which we want to represent and support.
Yeah, and I will say, like, Mel, we were together on Capitol Hill not too long ago for the Oak Steering Committee meeting. Our National Policy Action Team goes to the Hill frequently, and it's a bunch of us from DC in our suits talking about what we're talking about. And then for Oak Week, we come with youth, we come with our members who are coming from across the country, who work directly with kids, and the amount of attention we get when we come in with youth or these postcards or people who are living it versus when it's just the people in the suits from DC is shocking. Like, we immediately have the staff's attention. We more likely get to meet the Congress people and the members of Congress. People really feel the impact when they can hear from a kid why this is so important, rather than it just being this really nebulous thing, like you were saying. So yeah, we've seen it time and time again, like having these local impact stories, bringing in the youth, bringing in the people who are impacted just makes it so much more powerful. So we're hoping that this can do that in a pretty simple way.
I have one more question for you both, but Mads, I actually, talking about last year's Oak Week and being on the Hill, you also had the opportunity to connect on the Hill as well. And for folks tuning in, the Hill, talking about DC, the Capitol, Washington. So actually meeting with members of Congress. Was that your first time doing it? How was that experience for you?
It was my first time doing it. Yeah, I'd never been to DC before. I'd never really been at the Hill before that, and I was supposed to go when I was in 8th grade, but then COVID and all that happened, so I wasn't able to go to DC. It was my first time in DC. It was my first time there, and I would say it was a wonderful experience. I mean, we were able to speak our voices, to really be able to tell people like this is what we need, this is what we want, and this is how it's helping us. And I would say that they seemed very interested. They seem to like resonate with us and kind of connect with us in a way that I never thought about. So I'd say it was a really wonderful experience to be able to experience that firsthand alongside with a couple other people, a couple other my peers and stuff and my friends. And it felt like a kind of like a life-changing experience to be able to know that my voice was heard in a way that I never thought it would be.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love, Mads, with you in particular, I think, you talk about opening and building access to the outdoors through your clubs and then also participating on the Hill. You've been involved in outdoor advocacy in a handful of different ways. So I guess this question is definitely for both of you, but Mads, we'll start with you first. What advice would you give to a young person, who's watching today, tuning in, who wants to speak up? They want to get outside, they want to make a difference, but just isn't quite sure where to start. Like, where would you, what's some advice that you would give them? Where do you want their headspace to be? Where do you think they should start?
So I think that they should definitely start with just trying to go outside, like literally just go outside, appreciate nature, but also trying to find community, build a community, even if it's like with your friends and stuff, trying to find ways in which you can connect outside, even if it's not going to like a national park or anything. Even going to the park and spending time with your friends is really important, but also kind of being aware and of everything that's going on as well. Like things are consistently changing. Those things affect us and other people and large communities and stuff. But being aware is just it's I'd say it's probably one of the most important resources. It's being able to know what's going on and stuff. But also, there are so many different nonprofit organizations that are there to help. And even just by reaching out, asking questions like, "Hey, how can I get involved in stuff?" Volunteering is another thing that I would say was honestly very impactful for a lot of us. I mean, that was one of the first things that we did when I was in high school and we really wanted to do something outside, and it was volunteering. We went to like a local farm and we got to kind of like get our hands dirty while also helping the community. And I'd say that was honestly it was a very um I don't know, like we all felt really connected in that way. It was very nice to be able to work with other people and do things not just because we wanted to, but because we wanted to help. So say definitely just community work is definitely something that I would suggest. It's very magical.
I love that. It's as simple as, like, back to the icebreaker,
Hmm.
reconnecting, getting that exposure and developing that relationship with the outdoors so that you can feel like, okay, I know this space and I want to protect it, right? Like, I want to
Hmm.
save it. I want to make sure it's okay. And so love that. Love that exposure. Julia, how about you? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think everything Matt said was exactly right. Being informed and knowing how things at a very high level impact you is so important, and that's more than a ton of people in this country do. So I think that's just like a huge step in itself. And I think what we've been saying is exactly right. Like, there's really not one way to do advocacy. Like being an advocate doesn't mean that you're going to your member of Congress and pointing to bill text that you wrote and saying why that should happen. It can be absolutely any level or whatever type of engagement you want. So I think that can help kind of demystify it a little bit and make it less intimidating. But I think what Matt said about finding a community is exactly right. There's so many groups out there, like Latino Outdoors, like Oak, and tons and tons of others that are very specific or niche for specific people, or depending on the type of outdoor activity you're interested in, that really make it feel like a community and can make it a lot easier to get outdoors and start to do that advocacy at either a local level or national level. I definitely will plug Oak here. If there's youth on here, if there's adults listening, they're watching this, and you want to be more involved, I would love to talk to anyone who's interested and help to do that. The postcards, that's advocacy. Just writing your story and sending it in, that's advocacy, all the way up to going to the Hill. So I just want to stress that there's not one right way to do advocacy. Any way that you want to be involved, there's definitely groups out there. And if there's not, you can pull a Mads and make your own. So I think it can be really an intimidating thought, but it really is just sharing your story, which is the most powerful thing you can do. And at the end of the day, the members of Congress are there to represent you. That's their job. So if you tell them what you want, that is a really, really helpful first step, and it could just take a lot of different forms.
Absolutely. I have one more question for you all before we jump into the Q&A, but this is just such a good reminder that, like, talking about advocacy, talking about outdoors, talking about youth in the outdoors, like, I don't know about y'all, we could chat for on and on and on for hours about this. And so it's like time is flying. I'm looking at the little ticker on the side and I'm like, there's so much we can talk about. I wanted to ask you both one more question before we jump into the Q&A. You both have shared, so many different ways in which you both encourage folks to, get involved or to advocate, in their own ways, and the different ways in which people can do it. There seems like so many options. But what do you feel like is causing, what is that hesitancy for people, or what are the challenges that you both see when it comes to activating youth in outdoor advocacy? What are some ways that, as nonprofits or grassroots, like, how can we link? It's kind of a two-parter question, so you can answer whichever part you feel comfortable with. But, like, what do we think are those challenges that young people are facing in getting involved? And then, how can organizations like LO or Oak, better support? And yeah, just how can we better support?
Yeah, I'm Mads. I'm curious what you think about what's the obstacles for young people to get involved. I will say, from a nonprofit side of things and what we can do, I think there's a lot of talk around advocating for the youth, like I was saying earlier, rather than using the youth voices to kind of guide the work that we do. And one way that Oak tries to kind of toe that line and make sure that we're really incorporating youth, not just kind of to share our message, but to help to craft the message, is by having advisors and an advisory council that's led by more than half youth. So we have, I believe, 9 advisors, 5 of which are under the age of 25, who we really turn to help guide what Oak does and make sure that it's not, we don't craft this thing and then show them and ask for input, but we're constantly asking them to bring us ideas of different campaigns we can run and how they want to be involved. And then we can put the power of Oak behind their ideas. So it really is trying to, rather than like leveraging the youth for Oak's point, like mission, trying to let Oak lend its power to the youth, and really put our power behind their ideas. So recently we had an advisor come who wants to do a road trip this summer around national parks and was wondering how he can get involved with Oak. And he's going to now do a video series where he tries to talk to kids at every national park and just hear their stories. So then we're going to ask Oak members to get involved and have them take videos. So there's just so many ways that we can be there to kind of provide support and some advice or resources or whatever it may be, but really trying to let a lot of our ideas be youth-led, so we can kind of just help put that power behind that voice.
Yeah. I'd say like some of the challenges that a lot of youth would be facing would be just like how expensive it seems to really get outside, and transportation, and also just students and youth living in urban areas. getting out of the city seems both intimidating and expensive, and those are two of the things that kind of stop a lot of youth and families kind of going outside because it just seems like it's completely impossible to do. I mean, I'd never been outside until I was 16. I'd never been camping or anything, and one of those reasons was because I come from a low-income family. Both my mom and dad work extremely hard, but every time that me and my brother kind of like even brought that up, it was always like, you should do that when you're older and stuff. And it always seemed like something that I had to wait for. And that idea kind of just like dragged me to think like I can't really do this until I'm old enough, until I can afford it. And that's a problem that I saw amongst a lot of my peers who were in my school's outdoor adventure club. They had never been outside because they saw it as, well, I don't have a job. My parents like we come from low income families and it just seems completely inaccessible to kind of just, go outside and stuff. Especially for stuff like snowboarding, for skiing, all that gear, even renting gear out seems extremely expensive just to like get those things and be able to get out there. And same thing with rock climbing and ice climbing and all those things. Getting the things you need in order to do what you want to do is really, really hard, specifically for younger people who see these things online, they see other people doing it, but they also kind of struggle to find a community that they can do it with. There's also this like fear that comes with stepping out of your comfort zone at a young and older age. And it impacts a lot of people. It makes them wonder, like, maybe I can't do it because I'm scared. I'm scared of trying something new. And I feel like something that would really help is trying to get youth leaders, maybe like older people who have already done this or did it at a younger age and having them work with youth closely, kind of like mentors, and guiding them through the whole process would be really beneficial because that's kind of what happened with me. One of the members in Detroit Outdoors, his name is Uriel Llanas, he worked with me really closely and he kind of guided me through the whole process of like climbing, going outside, teaching me everything that I needed to do to be out there and feeling safe with myself and with other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Mads, that made me think. You're so right. And I think another maybe like misconception of the outdoors and conservation movement, and I'm not sure if we do a great job of pushing back against it, is that to get outdoors or to like be outdoorsy, you need to be doing like a 10-day backpacking trip through a national park in California, which is just so not true. Like there are pocket parks in urban areas, and there's a bus route that can take you 20 minutes outside the city to just a walking trail. There's just so many ways to be outside and engage with nature that aren't these like grandiose things we see online and Yosemite and all these amazing places, which if we can go, we definitely should, but it doesn't have to be necessarily that big. And I think that's maybe it makes it intimidating as well, and maybe a bit of a misconception that to be this outdoorsy person, you have to be doing that and camping over, cooking over a fire. But it really can just be 20 minutes walking your dog through a park rather than on the streets in the city. So that's something that you made me think about as maybe something we need to kind of push more going forward. Is it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It can really just be a kind of a slow, easy ramp into being outdoorsy.
We like to at Latino Outdoors, I think we call it like leisurely outdoorsy, right? So maybe you're someone who just, here to Julia's point, like, right, you walk your dogs through a park, right? Or maybe you use a bike lane to get to work or to get your groceries, right? That doesn't not make you an outside or outdoorsy person, right? It's sometimes we have to adjust what that narrative looks like and how we are defining outdoorsy too. So absolutely, like I'm someone who loves to just like hang out on a beach. I just lay there, truly, and that makes me outdoorsy because I am there and I'm in the outdoors, right? So I absolutely love that. Thank you both so much. This has been such a fun conversation. I want to turn it. We have a couple of questions that came through our chat, and it looks like we've answered a good chunk of them. But there is one here that I just kind of wanted to flag, and I think you both sort of touched on this too, especially Julia. This last one, your last comment about misconceptions. So it looks like we have, in your experience, what are some common misconceptions adults or policymakers might have about young people and their relationship to the outdoors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that what I was just saying is a big one. Like, it doesn't have to be national parks. It can be reading a book in your local park. And I am curious if maybe like a lawmaker, policymaker misconception about young people is, we've seen like phone usage and screen time increase. And so I'm wondering if they don't really see how much people want to be outside. And like Mads is saying, it's just not always possible, that there's all these barriers to entry and barriers to getting out there. And hopefully the postcard campaign can help to change that by showing why so many young people love to be outdoors. But yeah, I don't know if they know how much people want to be outside. It's just really not so accessible. And someone being indoors doesn't mean that they're choosing that. It could just mean that they don't have the money to do the ski rental or whatever it is, because you are so right, skiing is so expensive. Yeah, so I'd have to think about that, but that's a really good thing to think about, because we can definitely incorporate that into our work if we start asking more questions of policymakers about what they think about when they think about youth in the outdoors. Then we can kind of tailor our work around that.
No, yeah, and Juliet, I was thinking about exactly that. I feel like so many adults think that youth don't want to be outside because they see them doing so many other things, like consistently being on your phone and stuff. But I think it's the opposite. I think it's because we don't have that opportunity to really be put out there. Like I feel like if we were given the option to go outside, go camping, go skiing, even if it's like just like a 1 day trip or just like a small hike around like a park or anything, we would choose that if it was accessible to us. Like as soon as I was presented with the opportunity to go canoeing and camping, my first thought was, okay, well, do I have to pay for anything? Because if so, I don't really have gear. I don't have any of that.
Yeah.
But once it was handed to me, once I was told, well, okay, we'll be providing everything. You only have to bring yourself and just like a couple clothes and stuff. I immediately took that opportunity. I took it without a hesitation. And it was the same for a lot of students at my school. As soon as they were like, their first question was, okay, well, what do I have to pay? That was the first question that they asked. It was, what do I have to pay? But as soon as they found out that they don't have to pay anything and all they have to do is give their time and effort and willingly want to be there, they immediately signed up. They said, okay, well, I'm in. Like I will do it. Yeah. So I feel like there's that strong misconception that we don't want to be out there, but we do. We really, really do. We want to be out there. It more than anything. It's such a free opportunity to be able to be out there and just kind of be one with nature. It's life changing. So
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you both so much. And I think, just to add in my own 2 cents here, I think sometimes there's also this misconception that children, youth, however we're defining it, like young people, that they don't know what's best for the outdoors, or that they don't know, how to best manage or protect or take care of the outdoors. And I think the obviously there's a lot of problems with that kind of mindset and that narrative, but the fact of the matter is that young people are out in the outdoors. They have an opinion, just like all of us, just how any of us get opinions on like how things should be managed and used. And I think so often young people might be dismissed for having those opinions, when in fact they're constituents of, they are users of these areas. And, no one's going to know how to better manage or, know about access or challenges to a green space than the people who are living in those areas and trying to access or accessing, it successfully. So it's about also changing the narrative for how we see children and their additions to our lives as well. Like it's not just this nurturing role, but it's, Mads, you're a perfect example, Julia as well. Like, it's we have sentimental connections, and that inspires us to build change regardless of age. And that should always be respected. It should be always be dignified, and it should always be accepted and welcomed. So I think it would be my goal to really start changing like that narrative of like, youth have opinions, and they're smart opinions. They're based on real life experiences, and to honor that would be a huge piece on my end.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the youth opinions are more honest than the adult opinions, and especially in our advocacy work, it's like we somehow start talking in circles and it gets wonky. And then I look at this postcard and it's like, I like getting outside because it makes me feel calm. And I'm like, well, that's really it. Like, that's what we're all trying to say, but in such a weird way. So I totally agree. It's, we need way more youth voices in this space, not less.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, I think that was the biggest question, kind of the new question that we haven't touched on in our Q&A. So I know we're coming towards the end of our conversation. And I just, again, want to thank you both so much for just taking some time out to chat. I think, again, we talked about this from the start. I think the storytelling and sharing, your experiences and your journeys in the outdoors, in advocacy, is just so important, because for people who don't know what they don't know, these are what we'd like to believe, right, are these inspiration points, right? This is an inflection moment where someone can be like, oh, okay, maybe it is as simple as that. And it's like, absolutely, it is as simple as that. And you can get involved and you can get started, right? And so I'm always so fortunate being in this role of like, I sit on this intersection of like discovery and joy, right? So I bring people outside and they fall in love with these green spaces and they're like, how do I get more and do this more and bring other people? And I'm like, this is exactly how it starts, right? This is how we build movements, through that joy and through that excitement and through those lived experiences, which is so, so crucial. And I think it speaks to what you both were saying about like, you can really only have these lived experiences if you have access to these spaces and, you know, if you feel comfortable and welcomed in these spaces as well. So these are, again, like topics and conversations that we can really drag on for hours and hours. So I just want to thank you both so much for sharing your wisdom and both of your perspectives. And so, I mean, it wouldn't be a panel if I didn't just like end it with another question, but I'll leave the last word with both of you. What's your dream for the next generation of outdoor spaces? So I want us to think a little bit futuristic, a little like in the ideal situation. Like if we had everything we needed, what would, you know, the next generation of outdoor spaces look like to you both? So Julia, I'll kick it off with you, and then Mads, you'll have the last word before we say adios.
Yeah, definitely. I think my dream for the future of outdoor spaces is that it is kind of more assumed than it is right now. So, I think right now to go outside, we go to a park or we go to a beach. But like Mads was saying with art class, like in schools, it would be great if, classes were outside or there was outdoor classrooms in more places. Gym class could so easily be outside running around on a field. So I think my dream is just that I guess our jobs become a little bit obsolete in the future and it's assumed that people are going to be outside and it doesn't feel like this really fringe benefit that's nice to have, but it's really like this human right that a lot of our time is spent outside in a myriad of different ways. And it's not its own activity, but it's just kind of dispersed into every activity that we do. So that's what I hope.
Yeah. I completely understand that. But I guess for my dream vision is I would want there to be many more green spaces and clean green spaces in urban areas. I mean, Detroit, it's pretty urban, but there are a couple green spaces, but the problem with them is that they're not really clean or they don't really seem safe. Um, there's consistent littering and stuff like that, and it feels like as a community we're kind of failing to keep those places clean. So I'd want there to be a much stronger community connection in which where we connect in a way that we're like, okay, well, we want this, so we want to keep it clean because it's important. But something else that I would really want is I would want to see more Latinos, more Latinas out there. I mean, going out in into like greener spaces like parks, national parks and stuff like that. I didn't really see that many people that were Latino or Latinx, and just being able to see people out there who are a part of my community warms my heart, and it makes me feel so happy because it feels like I'm not kind of like imposing. I'm not in here in your space. I want there to be that stronger connection between more Latinos and Latinas who love being outside, and I want that to show and reflect when I'm out there.
I'm always, every time both of you share something, I'm always like, +1, and also this. I'm like, I just want to, again, we could talk about this for hours, but again, I just want to thank you both so much. Mads, again, you have such a unique perspective, and the work that you've been doing, even at such a young age, is just so inspirational, and I'm just so glad to see future generations and people like you just doing these things. Like it just wasn't very much present when I was growing up, and I didn't even know I can get a degree in the environment. I didn't know I can work full time in the environment. And so it's so beautiful and refreshing to see. And Julia, thank you so much for all the advocacy work. And, I think there's so much I've learned from just being a part of Oak and under the work that you do. And you're just such a powerhouse. So just thank you so much for just joining and sharing your perspective as well. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you both so much. And for those tuning in, we are recording this and we will be posting this across Latino Outdoors and Oak platforms. So if you jumped in a little bit later or you had to leave, all good. You'll be able to get the full video in just a couple of minutes. Maybe I don't want to promise minutes, but soon, ASAP, you'll be able to see it across our platforms. So thank you both so much for joining, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Super appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. Appreciate it
Thank
all.
you, Mel, for having us.
Bye.